Hi there, it's Baldwin Burgess. Here in Europe, we're going through some really crazy times at the moment. So Friday, it turned out that the UK wants to exit the European Union. Financial markets did not expect this, and neither did many of the people in Europe. And surprisingly, there's a big divide now in the UK about this decision, and it's taken markets off the rails all over the world. I I am trying to understand this myself, and the way that I try to understand things is I make content about it because that forces me to learn faster. Since I have the content, I thought I'd share it with you. Now, if you're from Europe, it may give you a few interesting questions to ask yourself. There's obviously not that many answers at the moment, and if you're not from Europe, I hope it gives you a perspective, a European perspective on what's going on here. Let's dive into it. So the vote turned out to this in favor of leaving Europe with 52 versus 48%. Now, if you look at the statistics of this vote, it's very clear that the younger people, the majority of the younger people really wanted to stay in the European Union, whereas the senior citizens, the elderly of the UK, decided to vote out. And this is quite an issue because it's something that you have to think about whether it is how well it's going to work out when the senior citizens of a society make such a big decision on the future of the youths. So what we have here is a geriatric revolution, and it's something that is it's a strong demographic in the UK because it's generally in Europe we have the societies are skewed to elder people. We have a lot more baby boomers than anything else as a proportion of society. And so it makes you think a little bit about how to take this democracy further. What moved these senior citizens to vote leave? Let's take a look at that. Well, first of all, we've had a new breed of politicians who know how to use the media to connect at an emotional level. And they're not the only ones. This is a new wave, I guess, that we're seeing again. It's happened in the past as well. But we have people like Donald Trump who are also showing us that if you craft very inflammatory and emotional messages, you can get a following. Rodrigo Duterte did the same thing in the Philippines recently. He became president, despite the fact that he would openly say that he sort of has a nature of a dictator, and he said extremely harsh, insulting comments at other ethnicities. Anyway, so the thing is, for some reason, these people are getting a following because they're pushing emotional buttons, and they're typically outspoken and clear. And so part of the message in the UK was also about when senior people care most about is their health care. So the way they position this is that instead of paying all this money to Europe, let's put in our own NHS system. But it turns out that this is backfiring already because Nigel Farage had to admit that there isn't really a clear plan to this. And so right now he's being called out for having run a false campaign. That's part of what the confusion is about today in the UK. Another, I don't know how important this is, but the UK is a country where where tabloids get a lot of attention and form public opinion about many things, and whether or not this headline had an influence in emboldening the voter to vote for independence. The royal family in the UK is never outspoken about political issues. It's their policy, but somehow they have not come out with an opinion as far as I know. But generally, the sort of idea was created that the Queen and her family would back a Brexit. I don't know if this is true or not. I'm not in the UK. I really don't know exactly if this is true, but it could be an element in that decision. Immigration was a big part of it as well. The last time I checked, Britain is an island. It doesn't mean that they won't have an immigration, but compared to all the other European countries, it is definitely a little bit more easy for them to control it than the continent. We're all struggling with the same issues, and the fact that this was spun as an electoral message is a little bit unsatisfying because, frankly, if they think they have a problem, then they should really have a look at the rest of Europe when it comes to immigration. But we're going to speak about immigration later. I think spinning immigration as a negative is not really the right message, but we're going to get into that a little bit later. Another argument was to make Britain great again, to revive the empire, that Commonwealth. And so, frankly, this is a very nostalgic message that resonates with older people. who have this inherent desire to sort of go back to the past when they were younger and when they have fun. Many people still have fond memories of those days. So evoking that in their hearts and in their minds is obviously a good way to get their votes as well. And now the question is, so they're calling June 23rd the Day of Independence, and now the big question is, will this man, Boris Johnson, become Britain's George Washington? If all these claims have to be carried out, they're going to need strong leadership. And will this leadership happen? Again, something that we'll look at in a little bit more detail later on. But there are many challenges ahead. So the first one is, can Britain keep its country together? Because Britain is made up of Scotland, Ireland, England, and Wales. It's not on this picture, but I think the main problems here are with Scotland, who is already outspoken about being a part of the EU, already speaking about calling a referendum to be part of the EU, and also already openly speaking about ways to block this referendum in the Scottish Parliament. I'm not enough of a political analyst to know if that can be done or not, but it's definitely in the news. Ireland, Northern Ireland, has always been a conflict zone. It's always been a difficult place for the UK because this is also bringing up, maybe opening up old wounds. Let us not forget there was a war up there and not that long ago, and there is a bit of a drive to reunify with Ireland. So they're definitely, from a local geopolitical standpoint, they definitely have a challenge cut out for them. We have this thing called Regrexit now, which grew over the weekend after the referendum, which is where many Brits, especially young people, find that this referendum is one of the worst things that ever happened to Britain. And 3 days after the referendum, more than 3 million Brits have already signed a petition to redo the referendum. So this is a growing tension in the country, and it's creating a divide as we speak. Also, we have a political fallout here from the referendum. So the Labour Party, which is the opposition party, literally just fell apart over the weekend. And now there seems to be a lot of vying for power to lead the Conservative Party after the Prime Minister David Cameron resigned. Parliament also has to rectify this Brexit, this desire for Brexit. And given all the strife and all the outcry of the petition and so on, what will happen in Parliament, we'll have to watch that very closely. Now, the other promise was about reconnecting the Commonwealth and bringing back Britain as a great leader in the world. But the question is, does the Commonwealth need Britain, or does Britain need the Commonwealth? So a lot of these countries have evolved, such as India, South Africa, Kenya, Nigeria, have evolved from the past. They are no longer in the situation that they were 30 years ago. So they've become massive economies, very assertive economies in the world. So the question is, does the UK still have a claim on these territories? They don't. And from a standpoint, for example, of Nigeria, will Nigeria cut a special deal with the UK when they can trade openly with the rest of the world? It's a big, I think it's a bit naive to believe that this Commonwealth will just fall in place again. I think elders are really being misled about this. And then you have the financial aspect of what just happened. So S&P and Moody's are already telling us that their outlook for the credit rating is negative, and this is a disaster. Also, the cost of, if the argument was about paying £350 million every week, the cost that was just created by the crashing stock market and its impact on the pensioners' safety in the form of their pension funds is multiples of that. And if there's a downgrade, this would only basically make it more difficult for the UK to borrow money, and it will also have a negative effect on its financial markets, hence also its pension funds, make the pound cheaper, making exports more expensive. This is a bit of a mess, really. So if this is typically something that the disgrace that happens after a disgrace. So financially speaking, this Brexit will be much more expensive than they have ever made all those senior citizens to believe. So this is a big challenge for them as well. And Europe just got a kick in the butt. And the question is, have they woken up now? Well, what we've seen over the weekend is that Europe definitely plans to play hardball. negotiating Britain's exit, and they have to, because the idea is to discourage the exit of other member states. There are other member states who have a populist uprising increasingly, and so this is going to generate a lot of hefty media headlines. It's going to be very loud and very confusing, so bear that in mind. And what came out over the weekend, when the main leaders of Europe, Germany, France, Italy, some of the major countries, came together in Berlin to talk about their strategy. The message, there's a bit of reading between the lines here, but first of all, give Britain some time to reconsider. And then if they really don't want to be a part of Europe, then that is exactly what will happen. This message was delivered very softly and diplomatically, but I think everybody in the leadership in Europe right now is saying out is out. And if you're out, it means that basically Britain will wind up in the same kind of position as any other independent country in the world when it comes to trading with Europe. And so it is I'm seeing a lot of boldness by European leadership. I think it's they seem to be putting together the kind of spine that we had been missing for so long. And their next tactical move, is to speed up the negotiations as soon as possible. And the question is Britain ready? Well, we haven't really heard about a plan. What would happen after Brexit? Is there a roadmap? Is there a strategy? Right now, what we can see is fighting an infight for power, and it all seems very improvised. And makes you wonder whether Boris Johnson, Michael Gove, or Nigel Farage actually really expected to win this election, because they don't really seem to have a plan. At least they're not giving us the image that they do. And most strongly is that the perspective that I think we all need to keep is that Britain already had very special terms within the EU. They had privileges over other member states. They've always negotiated very well on that. But so even if they reverse the Brexit, the big question is, will they lose their negotiation power? I think the answer is very much a yes. They will probably weaken their negotiation power at the European table. So no matter how the outcome is for Britain, this is not very good. It was a big gamble. They went all in, and they're not holding a good set of cards to make this bet. And remember, the youth is not happy with this outcome. So what kind of a revolution will this be? Something that I worry about is there seems to be a lot of strife in the society now. And this picture was taken only, I think, 2 or 3 years ago, when there was a strong uprising in London, again with youth. Youth is not to be underestimated in this equation. They're not happy. What about Europe? What's going to happen in Europe? Well, first of all, we have a rise of emboldened populists in Europe. They're from France, Holland, Greece, Spain, and Austria. Which what happened only 3 days after the UK referendum. I hope they're paying attention to see what kind of outcome this brings. It's very unstable. It's very dangerous. So. And having said that, on Sunday, I'm recording this on a Monday morning, Spain went to the polls, and the guy with the beard and the long hair there, what's his name again? Pablo Iglesias, won second place in the elections. It doesn't give him power. The incumbent party is also a bit short of power. They have to make a coalition. But still, for some reason, there are people voting for these people. The thing is, the outlook is that if the British Brexit fallout gets worse, then I hope it will make people understand that these populists, who are also button pushers, they play a very emotional game. Their rhetoric is not rational, it's very emotional. They don't really have a long-term strategy. It's just all about grabbing power. And I think we're seeing this generation of politicians who really would probably just only care about themselves grabbing power and then improvising along the way. This has happened before. It's not the first time we've seen their messages, the way they're pushing the buttons. They speak about immigration mostly, a weak economy and weak leadership. So they're playing in on the frustrations of their citizens. And as you probably know, when this happened in the past, it usually did not work out very well for anybody. In Europe, we have been at war with each other for more than 2,000 years. So the EU is not only an economic union, it is also a peace treaty. And this is very important, because above all, peace is everything. So there are very dangerous risks of a divided and unstable Europe, because we have a few neighbors that we don't spend that much time on in the media right now, but Russia wants more influence in Europe. They think a divided Europe is a pretty good idea. It makes that influence easier. Because the old saying is, to conquer you need to divide first, and if the division is happening, it's a very interesting outlook for Russia to grab more influence in Europe's main countries. Turkey is also overlooked in this, in my opinion. Turkey also has the ambition to again become more geopolitical power. Let us not forget that during most of the modern world, Turkey had an empire, a very large empire, and they have ambitions to further cement their position of power. So Turkey is right next to Europe, as is Russia, and I think we have to see that if we divide ourselves further, then we're making it easier for these nations to achieve their objectives. Now, whatever happens, if you're in Europe, vote for peace and stability above anything, because war and conflict is horrible and nobody wins. I don't think I need to explain this, but peace and stability really should be mostly on your mind. It means that we need to vote with our minds, not with our hearts, not with our emotions. I think we need to demand from our politicians that we have that they have a plan, a strategy that we can understand. The thing is also we need immigration. This picture speaks for itself, and I know 2060 seems far away, but it's really not. It's when your children will become your seniors, and so it's about your children also. It's about the next generation. When they become older, they will have less of a working force to support them if we don't have immigration. There are actually a few very good case studies about refugees and immigration. In fact, they built two very well-known countries. One of them is a world power called the USA. It was entirely built on refugees and immigration. Another one that comes to mind is Australia. So really, I hope you can look at immigration as a replenishment of a workforce that we desperately need here in Europe. So it's all about backing those who can articulate and execute an immigration strategy that makes sense. You can be tempted by, oh, they're going to come here and take away our jobs, and they're terrorists and all those kind of things. So irrational, emotional arguments. Remember the picture you just saw before the slide. I think we should only pay attention to people who can articulate a strategy that can make this work. Finally, I just want us to focus on the fact that, and to remember that in Europe we are one of the most privileged citizens in the world. We have something that matters. It's a brand that the world admires. A lot of people from the middle class in the world, when they can afford to, they will come to Europe on a holiday. We've achieved something which is unbelievable. It's a union which is very diverse and has been peaceful for 50 years. And I urge you not to throw this away. I urge you to keep this as a treasure. It's worth keeping as a treasure. So thank you for your time and for watching this. If you're from Europe, I hope it gave you a few important questions to ask. If you're not from Europe, I hope it gave you a perspective, a European perspective of what's going on here. I shared my own opinions on this and what I learned, but I'm still learning about this. So again, I insist, please do get in touch with me if you have any comments or things to add to this perspectives. I'm very interested in learning more about it, and so I'm looking forward to hearing from you. Thanks for your time, and I hope you enjoyed this and that it somehow also added some value to you. Thank you very much, and until soon.